Welcome back to Scholar Scoop. I'm Steve Loflin. Today, I'm joined by Todd Altomare, faculty member at Arizona State University and an award-winning advisor to our NSCS chapter at ASU. We talk about finding your path, building relationships, stepping into leadership, and why you don't need to have everything figured out right away. You'll also learn why saying yes to opportunities in college can help you build confidence before you ever step into the workforce. If you're a student wondering what your path is supposed to look like, I think this is the episode that will give you some encouragement and some practical ideas right now that you can use right away. So now, let's get some Scholar Scoop from Todd. Hey there, Todd. Thank you so much for jumping on today to give us some, what I'm sure is going to be some amazing Scholar Scoop. How in the world are you?
Steve, great to see you. Thanks so much for inviting me. I've watched your podcast online through LinkedIn and excited to be part of this little journey here. It's exciting.
Well, I'm super excited because when I think about what we're trying to accomplish here, I feel like your professional experience, at least, is something that has so many valuable little nuggets that I think can be really good for people, whether you may be a high school student or a current college student, even young alumni and parents, I think can get a lot out of your experience. So I hope you don't mind me sort of digging into some of the things that you've done that I think could be interesting and useful.
I love it. Yeah, thank you. Said quite a few decades of different types of journeys. So happy to share as much as we need to, and it's helpful for the viewers.
Yeah. And now I know you're a faculty member at Arizona State, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But, I recently, just this past week, I was down on campus at the University of South Carolina, which is where I did my undergraduate work. And I was invited down there to speak to a group of students that are coming into their freshman year. And part of what I had to do was reflect for a few minutes on my freshman year experience, like what it was like. And did that experience have anything to do with potentially what I'm doing now? And I'm kind of curious, like if you think back, and it was hard for me to like dig into the crevices to get back to my freshman year. It was a long time ago. But when you think about your like college experience, would you have imagined when you were in college that you would be doing what you're doing today?
Man, that's a great question. Gosh, I graduated in 1993, so 33 years ago. I'm trying to bring back the memories. I grew up in the East Coast. I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I went to Boston College, and I had a double major in finance and marketing, and then you were a marketing major as well. And I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do business, whatever that meant. That's very general. I liked finance, but I didn't see myself in corporate finance. And so during the process in like 92, 93, like that senior year, interviewed for a lot of different jobs, and a lot of them were on Wall Street. So I went to New York, quite a few weeks to interview with firms. Actually got one job offer, and my parents were like, my dad was like, yeah, you might want to stay here in the States, son. There's a lot of opportunity in Boston, and there's a lot of finance companies, marketing, so forth. So I decided to stick around. I found Fidelity. Fidelity Investments was headquartered in Boston, so it was a sort of a natural fit. And that was sort of my trajectory. Wouldn't go into any details that you'd like for 17 years. So I was there until 2010, and had a great career. I learned a lot of good skill sets, and a lot of good people. And so that's sort of where I didn't necessarily know I was going to be there for so long, but and especially in like the financial services industry. But based on my majors, I had some inclination that I wanted to be in somewhat of a finance role. But I think you and I have talked about over the last couple of years around like what do you really say passionate about, what you really like to do. And I found over probably a 3 or 4 year period early on that I really like working with individual people, like customers, clients. And that sort of, jazzed me every day to come to work and help them, whether it's, service related type stuff, solving problems, or, helping them with their investments, right? Like educating them to make them better investment people and save for retirement, save for college, and save for houses. And so that's sort of, I found that early on. And that was the path that I took for probably, 25 years after that.
Well, it's interesting too, because a lot of times when I'm talking to students that are starting to think about interviewing and where they might want to go work, sometimes they seem to be thinking about it like they're about to commit to something for the rest of their entire life. And I think to what you just said, or what at least I heard, it's like, you took this opportunity, I don't know, that you were thinking about for the rest of your life. But once you took it, you were able to see the things that you started to clearly be, passionate about, or those types of things. And then it turned into a much longer engagement, maybe than you expected. And I think that's really how you should look at it. Like, I'm going to go in here and give it my best, and then let's see where it takes me. What can I learn, and how can I grow? Is that how you felt about that experience?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I was looking for a job, right? You get out of
Hmm.
school, got to pay the tuition bills, and
Right.
start a career, whatever that looks like. And for me, it was a job, and I think for me, it was looking to gain some skill sets to get acclimated in a large, very large organization. And early on, as I started to work, I was like learning how to the process of the system, right? The internet wasn't around in 1993, right? So the ability to
Right.
like learn the operational aspect, get on the phone and talk with customers, like get get certified, get your licenses, like your series license to actually talk about stocks and investments and mutual funds and those kind of things. And I think early on, I didn't necessarily think this was going to be a 25-year career in financial
Mhm.
services, but over time, in the different types of jobs in the past that I went, I found that journey to be really exciting.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think sometimes if you can be open-minded to it, and then you start realizing, I'm building a lot of relationships here with people that I really admire and appreciate, and I like showing up to do this work every day. And I think if you can find that kind of an opportunity, you're really on a good path for happiness, right? Which is,
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I even talk to my students. I know we'll get into what I do at ASU at some point, but and most of my students are seniors, so they're going to
Mhm.
graduate in the next semester in this year. And I tell them, just like my parents told me, you don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to
Mhm.
know exactly what you're going to do. If you don't have a job in April and you graduate in May in a month, it's okay. It's not okay if you're just sitting around, loafing around, not doing anything. But if you're actively like,
Right.
searching LinkedIn, networking, setting coffee chats up, like sending resumes out, all those kind of things, applying for jobs, that's okay. Like the jobs will come in the skill sets we built, but try not to compare yourselves to the Joneses, right? To compare yourself to the
Right.
person to the left and the right. Yeah, your own person, and you'll find that that path over time. And the path is sometimes up and down, highs and lows, but it's really exciting. At the end of the day, you look
Right.
back at yourself and say, like, wow, I'm glad that I took that route, and those kind of things.
Well, and I think, sometimes students often forget how many resources are accessible to them right on campus, and,
Yeah.
people who can help them, and reaching out to your faculty members and asking for suggestions. And I just, at South Carolina, one of the things that I was telling the first year students there was, I still remember someone I met, at orientation, who gave me their business card and said, "Look me up when you're back on campus because I'd like to help you." Right. And I took the business card and I didn't think much about it. And then I just happened to bump into this person when I was back for my first year. And it's like, "Oh, I still have your business card." And he was like, "Well, why haven't you actually used it? Like, I haven't heard from you." Right. And it
Yeah.
was like a moment where it's like, when someone says, like, "Reach out to me, I'm happy to help you," take people up on that, right? Like, go and
Yeah.
leverage every person who can potentially open a door or help you solve a problem or think through a situation. And they're so accessible on college campuses that I think you should just be like going after all of those if possible. And I know you're that type of person in the classroom. And I think that's really incredible for the students that you get to teach.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you're spot on there. Like, if somebody gives you that sort of olive branch, like, take the olives, right? Like, yes, I will
Yeah.
reach out. And I think nowadays, a lot of times, even with these, say younger students in their, 19, 20, 21, they're ready to graduate. They don't necessarily fully know how to network, right?
Right.
What is it? I think some of them are a little anxious or nervous about like contacting. Hey, I got to contact Steve. Todd told me to contact you. Like, what are I supposed to do? Like, you have to sort of have a game plan, a strategy in mind. I wouldn't necessarily, first meeting, like, ask him for a job, but people love to talk about their experiences and themselves, right, and their journey. And the best thing to do is have them open up by just talking about like what they love about the company they work for, right? What is it
Right.
that they did, and did they make a career change, mid-career, those kind of things that can help them. So I think, from your perspective, like follow up is really important, after these
Mhm.
conversations. But, when somebody gives you that lead, go all in, because you never know where those, to your point, with the example of South Carolina, the ability to connect with people, you never know where that connection can take you. And a lot of times, I don't know if it's necessarily always true, but, my father used to say, like, it's not what you know, son, it's who you know.
Right.
In the world, to, I'm saying, get your foot in the door, right?
Yeah.
With someone, to get that conversation going. Absolutely true.
Well, you probably heard I say this a lot, so you might have heard this
Yeah.
before, but I can't overemphasize it enough. I always tell students, there's only one letter difference between networking and not working. And the not working part isn't always about a job, right? It's like I think of it from when I was starting NSCS and starting a nonprofit. I needed a network of people that could help me make this become the organization that it is today, right? And so this idea would not have worked without a network, right? So there's a lot of ways you can define that, but I do think like networking it's a little bit of a skill that I think you have to work on and think about and leverage it in the best possible way. But without the network, it's oftentimes hard to maybe get where it is you want to go or do the things that you want to do, because you need people to be a part of the journey for sure. So I don't know if that's been your experience, but that's certainly how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard you say that in the past as well. It is true. And so your network's your net worth, right? But the ability to connect with people. And sometimes, there's season connections. It could be just
Right.
a season where, I've met this person a few times, we've chatted, we've, sent each other, other relationships. Hey, meet with this person here, but necessarily didn't evolve into anything that was, job related or business related from an entrepreneurship perspective. But there's other folks that end up being like long lasting friends or long lasting
Hmm.
business partners, or just, connections that are decades long. So I think if you
Right.
go in with it with an open mind, and not necessarily try to have a strategy around this is what it should be, and this is what, let's let relationships evolve into what they potentially could be. And if it's only for a season, so be it. And
Right.
I When I look at relationships too, I also look at, like, and especially I think as I've gone through my careers, what can I do for you? Like, what kind of service can I do to you? It's not just, it has to be a sort of a two-way street. And
Hmm.
a lot of times, you try to help your students at a young age. Well, I don't know what to offer. I'm just graduating here. I might need
Right.
more of them and they need more of me. But,
Right.
offer that down at one of those meetings, because down the road, they might need a connection into ASU, or if you were in a fraternity or sorority, if you were in a business, student club organization, you can plug them in, right? Those kind
Right.
of things. So I think it's important to have it as a two-way street from a networking perspective, not just like, what can you do for me, but what can I do for you?
Yeah, it's definitely managing expectations. And
Yeah.
it's a little bit of that kind of fine art of reciprocity, right? Like, I'm going to do something for you, but I don't expect anything back. And I think that is hard for people sometimes. It's like, well, I did something for you, so you now need to do something for me. And I
Yeah.
don't think that that's the best way to navigate a successful life. But doing things for people will be memorable in all kinds of ways. And when something pops up, because you've done things for people, they're more than
Hmm.
likely going to be interested in trying to help, or, at least bend over backwards a little bit more than if you
Absolutely.
just randomly reached out and it's like, hey, I don't know you, I've never met you, but can you actually get me a job? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, let's see. I'm not sure about that. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit before we get to your classroom experience. I think a lot about leadership, and I know that you've been involved with a program that does some certification for leadership and leadership training. And I'm always like interested in sort of the leadership experience, right? And how people come to be good at leading and they realize that they have the capacity to lead in ways that's not always, there for other people. So when you think about leadership, first of all, how do you define it? Like, what is your definition of leadership? And then are you in the category that you can be born with that and not born with that, which is something
Hmm.
that I hear people say all the time. So yeah, let's start
Yeah.
there. And then I'd love to hear your perspective on a couple of other aspects.
Yeah, no, thank you. Those are great things. We talk about in class a lot, but I just think about my career in leadership because I over the course of my 32 years, I've had specific official leadership positions, managing teams and so forth, and I've been a follower.
Hmm.
But you can be a leader, regardless if you have the title, right? So I sort of define leadership as the power, the ability to influence others, right?
Hmm.
To do something, whatever that is. And I think and what I've read, and I've read a lot of different, books from leaders and podcasts, but John Maxwell is a really good one, and Maxwell talks about like the five levels of leadership, and one of the things is what he talks about in his books is around like the ability to I like it as a leader. The best leaders I've had is the ability to coach and develop others.
Hmm.
And if you're not doing that, you're just a manager with the leadership
Hmm.
title, right? So
Right.
the ability to to coach and develop others, understand who these individuals are in your team, right? So building relationships. You and I've talked about this in the past, but the big thing is building trust, and that takes time, especially if you're
Yep.
a new leader coming on board with a new team. We don't know each other. We don't know what we don't know. How do you, with iterations, build trust? Is it through making sure that we have one-on-ones every week? We're not just talking about task-related stuff. We're actually getting to know, you, Steve, and your goals and objectives and what you want to do in your career. And how do I, as a leader, help you get to those places? And so that's
Hmm.
sort of how I look and define leadership with the help of John, but giving the influence in others with the ability to coach and develop others to make them great people.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I do think there's some of those skills that you can definitely be taught or you can learn from the experience of other people that have helped you through mentoring and other things, right?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. To your question, right? Like, are you born or is it, sort of inherent? And I think it can be a combination of both, but I really lean on, it's a learned skill, and it's
Hmm.
over time. So I think it's learned from the beginning stages of when we're kids, right? We have
Yep.
maybe if we have two parents or one parent, whatever it is, or grandparents, watching them, how they lead the household, how they lead their lives.
Right.
And then it gets into, activities, sports, clubs in your, elementary and high school and in teens that you've been on, watching those coaches and those folks and how they made you feel and were they good at leadership or not, and then getting to the classroom, right? Your former teachers, whether it's in grade school or high school or in college, and then into the workforce. And so you have all
Hmm.
these iterations of like people over decades that you've even 20, 30 years that you can sort of say, I didn't like that approach, I love this approach, and then sort of you build your own style.
Right.
And so I think that's all part of this, being around people and really, being observant, right? And seeing what leadership works well. And then you create your own style, right? It's nothing wrong with like copying folks' style to make it your own. I think it is a good way. And some people, I think, just naturally, maybe in their DNA, they might just be born with a
Hmm.
little bit of that, just from who they are and the families and so forth. But I think it comes down to it's really a learned skill that definitely can be learned and can be very valuable. Not only if you manage leading people, but just leading yourself in this
Right.
this this life.
Well, I think too, like on one level, there's sort of that angle of like the corporate leader that's kind of got a team and people. And then there's the folks that we work with, you and I, on college campuses, right? These
Yeah.
students who come into college and have the opportunity to potentially become like a leader of a club or an organization that they're a part of. And I think sometimes what I've seen recently, especially, are students are asked if they'd like to step up or into a leadership role, and they have a sense of anxiety about that. Like, I don't know how to
Yeah.
be a leader. I don't know, what a leader's supposed to do. I'm going to be an imposter if I decide to do that. And my belief is like, well, this is the best time in the world for you to say yes to being a leader because you get a lot of support. What's
Mhm.
your take on that? Like, what do people need to do to stepping stone their way up to the corporate leader type people that you've had a lot of experience with? Like in college, what should you be thinking about if you have a leadership potential opportunity?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm like you. If you have the opportunity, if it's a couple of things, one, if somebody's asking you, right, to be on the board of a student club or organization, like take your raise your hand, like yes, I will do
Right.
it, right, and then hold the anxiety for a few minutes, right, and then compartmentalize that. Things will be okay. To your point, in any college, university, you're in I not call it a safe environment, right? You're around peers that are your age, right? From freshman to senior, and everybody's learning and growing at their own pace, but at the same time. And so, if you have no leadership experience whatsoever, from your previous days in clubs or student sports or whatever, why not do it in a safe environment with folks, like me, for example, you, the advisors, the staff, but also the other student leaders, right? We're all in
Hmm.
here and learning together. I think can only bode well for these students young early on to make the mistakes in this sort of, I don't call it controlled environment, but this environment where they can make mistakes and
Right.
there's no sort of big repercussions, right? The
Right.
workforce, we're not in the military, and we're not leading a charge into a battle.
Right.
It's
Yep.
okay. We make, but they learn from that and they grow. And I would say do it early on. So if you're a freshman or sophomore in a university, do it early on. So that way you get different experiences. Maybe you're with NSCS one year, and then the next year you want to go into a fraternity or sorority or some other type of business club or something that's your passion or interest. You just continue to build that. It's good for the resume. It's good for the
Right.
soul. It's great for your skill sets. And then when you get into the world, whatever that is, in business, nonprofit, for-profit companies, now you have that confidence, right? To
Hmm.
go out into the marketplace and showcase that I did have great leadership experience back in college. And here's what it looked like. And here's some of the mistakes I made. And here's some of the things that we did and so forth.
Yeah. Which I think when you're interviewing for something, potentially saying
Mhm.
that you took on a leadership role or you had responsibilities, it goes a lot further than just saying I was a member of this
Yeah.
organization. And the membership can get you so far, but the leaders are probably the ones, if they're making choices like, oh, here's a person and here's a person, like which one might be the best option for us, right? Well, this one was a leader in their chapter or their organization. Let's see about that one or go a little deeper with that person. So
Yeah.
I think it's really important. And, it's that thing that always comes up. It's like, just say yes to things in college, like say yes, see where it will take you, what you can learn. You might not enjoy it, even if you thought you would initially, but you did it. Like you said yes. And then you took what you learned and go try something else out. And I think the more students can just embrace college as that kind of an opportunity, the more that they will have at the end of it to talk about and to say how they grew and found their path to something maybe they weren't even imagining.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think just whether it's, early on freshman or sophomore year, maybe you're just a member, but you're watching the leadership, right? You're watching, you go to these, weekly meetings typically at ASU and you're seeing how they're doing the PowerPoints or the fun activities they're doing or,
Hmm.
some of the other meetings that they're having and the confidence that they're building. And then, apply for that or for the position next year, right? Or in
Right.
another student club. I think that could bode well. But yeah, like to your point, you should give it a try, early on and often because it's only going to help you in your life in general. And you may hate it, and that's okay, right? But you learn
Right.
and you grow. But most of the time, you're high probability you're gonna love it, and you're gonna maybe bring those skill sets to the workforce where you're going to be leading teams, leading individuals, maybe leading companies. If you're an
Hmm.
entrepreneur, you have to be the leader because you wear all the hats. You're the CEO,
Right.
the CFO, the trash guy. You're everything, right? So
You do it
you have the
all.
ability to communicate effectively, sell your products, and that's all part of leadership. And so,
Right.
yeah, very important.
Well, speaking of entrepreneurship, I know we can jump over a handful of years where you were in
Yeah.
your financial services, making the magic happen for people, I'm sure, with all of their wealth and resources. But you actually then decided to take a bit of a pivot with your career. And And I think it's a pretty significant one when you were thinking about what you're going to do next. So tell us a little bit about that shift from the professional services, financial services to where you are today. How'd that happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know we've talked a little bit about it. Early on, I spent 25 years in corporate financial services. And I think the last 10 years of my career up until 2018, I was on the road traveling, meeting with ultra high net worth clients anywhere in the country, in the States. And, with a grown family at home and you're always on the road, it's tough to sort of balance that work, personal life balance. And so decided to take a hiatus from financial services in 2018 and moved on to the entrepreneurial space in Arizona. And it wasn't me starting the company. I was actually working with a couple different entrepreneurs. One is software development, and the other one was in sort of private equity, real estate, multifamily. And I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about partnerships. I learned a lot about the entrepreneurship environments and the grits, the hard work, the failures that you may have, and some of the great successes. I had so experiences. I mean, I learned a lot, and did I think I did pretty well. But I did have interaction with some, just, I call them bad actors in general, and that caused me to sort of take a second look and say, where is this pivot in my life right now? And is it really the right choice? And so, right around COVID time in 2020, I was meeting with, one of my friends in the neighborhood. Our girls play volleyball together. We had some volleyball tournaments, and he was a professor at ASU in the marketing department. And he said, "Hey man, you'd be great at teaching. You ever thought about going to the academia?" I'm like, "Nope, never really." That wasn't my plan back in, like, graduating in 93, like you talked about earlier. Like,
Right.
what's the career journey look like? And it's going to be ups and downs. And this was a 360 pivot, right? From, corporate capitalism, financial services, wealth management, to going into a nonprofit in the largest university in the country, in ASU. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And I had meetings with our chair. I finally got one class during COVID to teach in person. It was a negotiation class. I had a lot of experience with negotiations, whether it was contracts or employment or, buying a house, selling a house, cars, and those kind of things. And I really loved it. I loved being in that class environment. There was only 30 kids in the class, so it was pretty manageable. I got really good reviews. So I'm like, okay, this could be something that's really interesting. So they gave me another course. I'd say two of the following semester. One, it was an entrepreneurship course, and I had some experience there, but also worked with a lot of entrepreneurs from the wealth management perspective, and got great reviews. I really enjoyed being in the class, and I think some of the things that you and I talked about bringing in the class is not only your experience. Like, I'm not a PhD, I'm an MBA sort of career track faculty, so I had a lot of deep experience in a lot of different areas in life in general, but also in business, and be able to bring that to the classroom and talk to our students and showcase those successes, those failures, the moments of strategic thinking within a large organization. How do you pivot in careers and those kind of things, and then bringing in guest speakers over time to help sort of uh, you know, collaborate with our students. So what a great journey this last, going into my 6th year now. It just finished year 5. It's been amazing. A blessing to be in front of, juniors and seniors in college that are very impressionable, that are, want to learn and grow, but also like, what am I going to do when I, graduate here from ASU in the next year or so? And I have conversations on a daily basis, multiple times. It says informal mentorship, and just talk about them, them about finance, financial services, entrepreneurship, like whatever it is, trying to help them, sort of compartmentalize their thoughts and get them to, interview and those kind of things. So it's been a great, 360 transition transfer. And, I don't know if it necessarily you find purpose in life, but one of the great purposes is to be able to give back to others. And I can do this in this environment, and it's been awesome.
Well, if you think about it, just based on what you were saying earlier, all the experience that you had after you made that first decision to take the first job out of college, right?
Yeah.
All of that collectively has now gotten you the experience. So you're standing in front of a room and they can really tap into all of that to give them a lot of perspective and a lot of help and a lot of focus. And I do think if more students would look at the person in front of their classroom and think, well, that person has been through a lot to be here today teaching this class. How can I potentially, tap into that to help me? I think it'd go a long way in helping people get more out of the classroom experience and potentially engage more with a faculty member that could be positive for both sides of the puzzle. So I love how you pivoted to what you're doing now. I think it's great. And I know from observing you that the students really do love your approach and the way that you tapped also the resources and the people that you met over a lot of years are now also a part of your teaching team almost, right? You bring those people to
Absolutely.
class. And that's also a luxurious experience. Do you feel like the students really do appreciate when you have those people coming in to actually help show exactly what they can do if they want to be an entrepreneur, for example?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for the observations. Absolutely, mate. I receive feedback all the time in class, in person, but also use my reviews on how the guest speakers, made a difference in the semester. Right, part of any sort of academic classes, lecture. I do a lot of facilitation. We do case studies, those kind of things. Bring up real life stories. That's what they love, right? That's what they sort of
Mhm.
yearn for. And then when you bring in folks that have entrepreneurship background and have had a lot of failures and struggles, and our students want to hear that because that you can go online and you can just go through the YouTube shorts and say like everybody's successful, everybody's driving Lamborghinis. That's not the real world, right? So you're
Right.
hearing it right in front of you with folks that I trust and bring into my classroom. And so, one of the words I wanted to say is like relatable. I think in anything that we do as teachers, professions, leaders, right? Be able to
Mhm.
relate to others, right? I'm in a different generation. I'll be 55 this year. My kids are, the students are 20. How do you relate, 30-year difference in all this experience that they have is I relate to them. We have fun in class, we joke around, we learn, we have a lot of critical thinking. I think that's sort of what's part of my class, so that makes it sort of a fun environment, exciting environment where students want to come in and want to, learn and grow, through all the different things that we do in class.
I think that's a good point, and I don't know if you've heard a lot about this, but one of the things that we've been learning through a mentorship program that we do at NSCS is there's a lot to be said for the whole idea of like reverse mentorship, where
Mhm.
you mentioned you're the 55-year-old and then they're the 20-year-old. Like, what can you learn from each other that's going to help you somehow be more effective or more, open-eyed to what's going on where you are in your life, right? And I think the 20-year-olds can certainly teach you a lot about what's happening. And at your age, you can teach them a lot about how to get on the path that might get them where they want to go a little bit quicker, or at least to have more information. Do you ever sense that, like that? You say relatable, and I think that's a really good word. I also just wonder if there's some kind of reverse helping each other that comes out of those discussions and whatnot.
Yeah, 100%. It's actually a great point. I'm always learning and growing, and I always tell the kids somewhere, I'm like, I'm not the smartest guy, I'm the smartest person in this class, right? So, I tell them over time, like, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. When I say that, like, they have the experiences and et cetera, because that's how you're going to learn, right? And so I say that, so I'm not the person up front with lecturing you and you listen to me. This is that. Like, it's that's why we have facilitated conversations. So I can learn and grow from your perspectives and thoughts in class on what you think about this case study, about this real life situation that I brought up in leadership or whatever else it is. And so I think that's really important. A lot of if you're not fully involved or enthralled with like artificial intelligence, I have students that are learning this and they're learning how to code and and building websites. And so I'm having these coffee chats with them and they're telling me this and I'm learning, I'm going to Claude and I'm trying to do things now. So it's definitely a great sort of two-way experience. I look at either formal mentorship or informal mentorship as this reciprocity. We actually have sort of a two-way street that we're both learning and growing together. Sometimes you have specific interactions. Hey, I'm applying for this job at Fidelity and I worked there for 17 years. Can you help me understand what the interview process looks like? Those kind of things. And I'll lead on with more questions for them. And then a lot of times the conversations, it could be just life in general, right? And learning from your perspective. And I think, one of the things that, we haven't talked about, but is leadership. I really strongly feel this is emotional intelligence. The EQ is greater than IQ. And I teach it one of my leadership classes, especially at ASU, is that, you need people with the soft skills. You need folks that, understand who they are and embrace sort of, the self-awareness and being aware of others. And do they have the empathy? Everybody has empathy, but do they utilize a way where I can, hey, Steve, I can actually put my feet in your shoes and really understand what you're going through. Even if I haven't gone through your situation, I can do that. And so having those kind of skill sets is really important in the world, right? Regardless of where you go in terms of profit, nonprofit in general. And I think that's really important. So I talk a lot about that in my, sort of mentorship coffee chat meetings with these students, and help them understand that, focus on things that you can get better at in emotional intelligence, because that's where companies are looking at now.
Well, I know just from this conversation, I can tell how lucky your students are that you're so invested in their success. So that really does make a big difference, and I'm sure they appreciate it. I know we're running out of time, but maybe if you wouldn't mind, maybe really quickly, you were telling me about a new opportunity that you've been developing at Arizona State that's about to launch. And maybe we would have some students listening in that might find this intriguing or something they'd like to explore. And it sounds amazing. So do you want to maybe talk about that just for a couple minutes, and then?
Yeah, sure. No, yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So I'm a co-director of a new program at ASU launching this fall called the McKenna Life Sciences Business and Entrepreneurship Program. It's actually for incoming freshmen. So they come into ASU and get a sort of interdisciplinary program. So they'll get a dual degree in one of 5 life sciences, 1 in 3 business degrees, and then a certificate in innovation and entrepreneurship. And so this program is really going to help students sort of bridge the gap, the intersection of life sciences, business, and entrepreneurship. So if you're thinking about being a doctor, have you ever thought about, the working for a hospital for 30 years, or you may want to be your own doctor and run a business? Do you have those skills that are necessary from an entrepreneurship perspective of running a successful business? Yeah, you wanted to get into healthcare, but have you thought about like drug development? So we're going to teach these skill sets over a 4-year program, and just really excited to launch the program in the fall. We have a small cohort of 28 students via our inaugural cohort, and the ability to grow and develop others into the world of artificial intelligence, business, and healthcare, and big pharma. So thanks for let me quickly speak about the programs. We're pretty excited about what we've built so far.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank
and I
you.
think for any, high school student especially, that's like, what do I want to think about doing, where I might want to go to college? I think Arizona State is, always a great place for students. And I think this could be an ideal program for some students that are interested in those things that you were talking about. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
And also just thanks for spending some time with me on this Scholar Scoop conversation. I have really enjoyed getting to know you over the past handful of years, and I appreciate, your commitment to working with our NSCS chapter as the advisor at Arizona State. And I think like I've said a few times during this, the thing that has just really impressed me the most is your commitment to the student experience and the way that you care. And so, I know that's a great thing for students, and I do hope they appreciate it. So thank you for all of this good Scholar Scoop.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. Thanks so much. I'm humbled to be part of this. I've known you for, I think, almost 5 years now, and it's been a great organization. I can't wait to get the fall started with our club and our student organization at NSCS. And thanks for the time, and hopefully some of our students will get some tidbits out of this to make some great things in their plan over the next 4 years.
I'm sure they will. So thank you so much, Todd.
You're welcome. Thanks, Steve.